format is very diverse. It's got a lot of decks in contention for those top slots, but just because a deck's not the best doesn't mean it's not unplayable. So with this list, that's what we're here to talk about, is the decks that we feel can contend with the best decks of the format, such as Salamangreat, Thunder, and Striker. So we have 3 total honorable mentions that we want to talk about because they're very good, but for one reason or another, they didn't make the list. So, Joe, go ahead.
All right, so the one I really wanted to talk about was the Guard Dragon Crusadia deck. I think this earns an honorable mention slot just because the actual deck itself, it reminds me a lot of like older combo decks where they only take 2 cards to play. In this case, it only takes 2 Crusadia cards. And the boards you end on are insane. Like I've seen some of the stuff I've been testing with lately. You end on boards of like your Borreload Savage, the Quantum Dragon, Crystal Wing Synchro Dragon, or Hot Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, etc. But the only problem with the deck, it's just super susceptible to hand traps. And every other deck that does combo-oriented stuff, like Guard Dragon Crusadia, can just play through hand traps better than it can. So that's why I think the major downfall of this deck is. But go ahead.
I was going to say, I agree. The deck just has a few key points that if you Impermanence, if you Veiler or Ash, that just, falls flat on his face.
Another big thing that's holding it back is the fact that we have the threat of a looming ban list coming, and a lot of the cards that makes the deck good are possible ban list contenders, so that doesn't help it out either.
Yep, so that's our first honorable mention. The second being my rogue deck pick of the format, which is Nekroz. Now, I know I'm a little biased here, but this deck is very good at contending with most of the metagame. It has struggles with back row decks, but for the most part, those are non-existent at your high tier tables. You'll see your odd off Subterra Guru or Altergeist, but you can establish a board or break a board relatively easily, and as long as you manage your resources, it's going to have a relatively easy time. The issue is a big bad boss monster called Thunder Dragon Colossus just shuts this deck down, and that deck is a very, very hard matchup. And after YCS Atlanta, that deck is going to pick up in popularity.
Oh yeah, 100%. Like the thing with like Nekroz is, like you said, like its matchups are good across the board. Like its Thunder Dragon matchups is terrible. I think one of the things that makes it really bad is the fact that you only have access to 1 Unicorn, so you don't have like the ability to like straight draw into it like most other decks draw into their outs. But I think the only other thing that really has going against it is the fact that the hand traps that are good against everything else are also really good against Nekroz. Big one being Lancia.
Yeah, the ability to recur your ritual spells, and there's just a few things that the Forbidden and Limited list is keeping us from doing. So you can just be put into some bad situations where you just don't have the resources in deck or the ability to get your stuff back from grave to get what you need accomplished, such as Shrip being at 1 or Unicorn being at 1. So that's why it's just an honorable mention for me. And the next deck is Altergeist. Go ahead, Joe.
Right. Now, the Altergeist deck, it's really funny that we mentioned it as an honorable mention now, especially how dominant it was there for a little bit. Things it has going for it. So, its Striker matchup is really good, because in terms you can main deck cards such as Anti-Spell Fragrance. You also have access to Secret Village of the Spellcasters. You can also main deck Floodgates such as Rivalry of Warlords and stuff like that when they have to straight open array to get into it. Its Thunder Dragon matchup is actually really good too, because you main deck cards such as Impermanence. Silquitus is really good against Colossus, and your Protocol is an insane card. So those are the things you have going for it. It also got a buffer with Pot of Extravagance, that being one of the best decks to play it in. It's just an insane +1 at that point. The only problem is now that we've introduced into a format where now you have Orcus decks running around, which is a really big one. It has a really tough Orcus matchup. Its Salamangreat matchup is also really tough, being that everything that you want to do in an Altergeist deck, you can it's identical into a Salamangreat deck. The only problem is Salamangreat literally can do it with almost any opening hand, whereas Altergeist can't. That's a really, really big issue.
Yeah, Altergeist actually has to wait a turn most of the time to set up their board. You got to draw a Trap Faker or something along those lines to get where you want to be. So it's just a little bit too slow for the current metagame, I think.
There's just too many ways to interrupt the multi-faker, and that's huge.
All right, so getting onto the actual list, our number 5 pick for this rogue deck is Trickstar. So Trickstar is a deck that has been around for way too long, but it's completely avoided every Forbidden and Limited list in a roundabout way. It's took a few small hits here or there, Terraforming, Scapegoat, but the deck is still doing what it's always done. It's normal summoning Candina, light stage Lycoris, Reincarnation. So between the current metagame, the hand traps in the format, and what the deck has to deal with, it doesn't have a hard time. It's had the same issues it's always had. Just outing a monster bigger than 1800 because you have to invest 2 monsters to make a link monster or even more than that. But with the addance of Pot of Extravagance as well as a few other adaptations in the deck, it's definitely, I think, solidified itself as a rogue deck in the format.
I for sure, especially when you got Trickstar Carabine, which kind of alleviates the problem being able to give big monsters. Like you said, you also have access now to Pot of Extravagance, which is a huge +1 card. Trickstar Reincarnation is still an outstanding card. The only problem with Trickstar Reincarnation being a trap card, but that one specific card makes it really hard for Solomon Great players to play, and that's why I think it's a really good rogue strategy right now.
Yep, being able to, make a Nightmare Phoenix, pitch Reincarnations, use it, special back, make it unicorns. Like, the deck still has combo potential. It's just sometimes it just doesn't have enough gas in the tank to get through those really tough boards, so that's why it's at number 5. So our number 4 pick is True Draco, which has been a deck for even longer than Trickstar. But
I'm trying to think when Maximum Crisis came out.
Yeah, it's changed its strategy over the years because of the Forbidden and Limited list, but it's still around, and it's still annoying the heck out of me, that's for sure. So
I think what makes it so good of a rogue strategy that we have right now is it still has access to all of its tools that's had in the past. It doesn't have access to Masterpiece like the traditional True Draco decks used to, where it's a super oppressing card. But your little baby Dracos still do the same thing. They still get your spells, your traps. Well, now you have access to Dynamite Knight, which I think is really good. Majesty goes get your monsters. Ignis is really good going second card because they go get your spells. And it has access to every single floodgate in the game that's good right now. Every single one.
And that's the thing that, Altergeist has access to some floodgates, but only can play 2, being Secret Village and Rivalry, while True Draco doesn't always sit well, but it can play just about any floodgate in the game. Summon limit goes in, there can only be 1. And those are a lot more impactful this format than, Rivalry or Warlords. So being able to just draw 6 cards between Heritage, Demise, Desires, Duality, like the deck is consistent as ever, and it's going to be able to push through just about any board. The only issue that you'll hear me say a lot is it struggles with Thunder Dragon. It just gets hard countered by that Colossus. So
your monsters, your traps and spells just do not do enough against the Thunder Dragon board, especially now that you have a lot of the Thunder Dragon board switching just straight over to Sekka's Light. Your spell and trap cards are going to do nothing against it. The Colossus being able to protect itself, your trap cards do nothing against it, and just your Draco monsters in general, only Dynamite Knights and Ignis can run over a Colossus with the field spell up. Majesty's Maiden can't do it. So, I mean, you have a set of 3 of monster that a lot of them run that can't get over it. The best they can do is tie, and then Ignis and Dynamite. So you have a total of 4 monsters in your main deck that can do it.
Yeah.
And then all your... Go ahead.
I was going to say, even though you can run over it, it's got that built-in protection. So you're always going to be struggling with the Thunder Dragon matchup, which is why this deck is stuck at number 4. So our number 3 deck is another control deck, and that would be Subterror Guru Control. Now this deck, it came out, and it was in the spotlight for a while, and it did earn its place, taking a couple tops at regionals, and I believe 2 at YCSs. But it's been kind of flying under the radar, and that's because sometimes, going second sucks. And with these kinds of decks, good players that try to pilot them could have bad luck at events, but the deck is very powerful, being able to play floodgates like there can only be one and summon limit, as well as an omni negate hand trap to negate anything. And the consistent one card engine that, just like Trickstar has, it's going to be able to do the same thing over and over again. Just, it's kind of oppressive once they get going. They'll slow the game down to your pace and make you play their game.
Right. It's amazing that one card out of one set completely put this deck on the map where it was non-existent before. The Guru itself is just such a powerful card, especially being able to interrupt your opponent's plays and whatnot. Being its effect being a quick effect to book a moon, anything, is insane. Like you were saying, it has a searchable hand trap. The floodgates it can play are just like any other deck, are the most powerful floodgates that we have access to right now. You have access to Extravagance, which is insane in that deck. You go on, so on and so forth, and it's an incredibly linear strategy. But that's where I think one of the biggest faults in the deck is it only has the linear strategy. Another thing, if the Guru gets stopped, it can be Kaiju or anything like that, then the best part about the deck, which honestly I think is Hidden City, just gets turned off completely. I mean, for all the positives that this deck has, the back end of it makes it really, really hard to play.
Yeah, which is why it's here on the rogue list and not the top 5 list. But all these decks have their issues, but they are very powerful, and they're able to contend if they're piloted by the right player and they get the right matchups. But our number 2 pick is Pendulum Magician, or Pendulum Variants, whatever you want to call him. This has been a deck for about a year and a half, I think, right?
Yeah, roughly.
Where it's been just consistently playing different engines and different builds and focusing on different win conditions, but it's been around ever since Electromite came out in Master Rule 4. It's been either a top tier or close to it. So what do you have to say about Pendulum Magician?
So Pendulum Magician is just one of those decks. So like when the Zoo era ended, and then we had that like rough period where we didn't have Spider or anything for like 2 weeks, the deck came out of nowhere just as the best deck. You had even under Master Rule 4 without Electromite, you still had access to all your tools. And then so on and so forth, you get Electromite, then Electromite goes to 1, so on and so forth with Astrograph. And now what we have now is the remnants of the Pendulum deck. So it's one of those decks that's been, ravaged by the ban list, and other cards have come out that have kind of made the strategy a little bit slower and whatnot, but it's still seeing success. A lot of the players that you're seeing, like Jeremy Mitchell, is a very big popular one. He continues to play the deck. He's a good pilot. He's been playing it for a while, and that's one of the biggest things about the deck. It's going to take someone who's been playing it for a while to be able to do well with it at high-level events. Your boards you can make are insane. Vortex is still going to be a powerful card. The Magician engine itself, having access to Pendulum Call and whatnot, is a very powerful engine. And you're mainly going to be able to do the same thing every single game, because literally all you need is a bunch of Pendulum cards at hand. But that's wherein lies your problem. Pendulum decks don't really have any set like 1 or 2 card combos like a lot of the combo decks do. Your entire hand is the combo, so you have to have a hand of like 4 to 5 Pendulum cards. You were saying earlier they have to open 2 extenders, a turbo card, X amount of things. You have to have scales. There's too much going on right now in the format for it to have continual success with other people who are not experienced with the deck, like a Jeremy Mitchell or my buddy DeBlessing Wilson, or anyone else like that. That's just how Pendulum in, and it doesn't help that it's ravaged by a lot of the hand traps that are popular right now.
Yeah, so with this pick and our number 1 pick, they're definitely pilot dependent. That's why we wanted to talk about those other 3 that have relatively linear strategies, but are very easily adapted, but take a little bit of time to perfect. The Pendulum deck, as well as our number 1 pick, which is Danger Orchist, they're not very forgiving to players that don't understand every card in the deck and what they do and how they interact with other cards in the metagame. So with these 2 strategies, that you have to know what decks you're going up against, how they play, what exactly you have to play around, because they are decks that can get stopped relatively easily if you misplay. So I don't have any experience playing Danger Orchis, so I'm going to let Joe take this one and talk about the strengths and the weaknesses of this deck and why it deserves to be in this number 1 spot.
All right, so Danger Orchis, as you know, I've been playing that a lot myself. One of the things I like about the deck is its ability to play through hand traps. And what I mean by that is based on the builds, especially with like the danger cards, which is think of the danger cards in that deck as a bunch of extenders, whereas your Orcus cards are just part of the engine and everything else is a starter. That's what I like about it. Every single hand that you look at a deck like that, they're all playable, and that's insane to think about in a rogue deck. That's insane. The only like real issue with it's just like yes, you have the ability to play through hand traps and being able to navigate through them is pretty easy. The only problem is right now, especially since we don't have the new support, which we're supposed to be getting Dark Neostorm, the deck only has one of two plays. The first play is going first. You end on a Azathoth, and people are now aware of that, especially after the YCS Dusseldorf, a couple regionals here and there. That's the only real play the deck has going first. The second part is you're going second play, where is you make Boral Sword with them having a monster, and you with your Boral Sword and your Harp, and that's game. The only problem with that is when you're going second, you can only do so many things through so many interruptions. And if your opponent has a way to put more than one monster on the board where a Kaiju can't deal with it, you can't kill them through that. But nonetheless, like I said, it's one of those decks. It's insane right now. It's only going to get better with time, especially with Dark Neostorm coming out. So that deck's going to evolve. So you're probably going to see it move off of the rogue list into top tier contention. But for now, I just think what we have access to is just better as a rogue contender than it is an actual meta deck.
Okay, I couldn't have said it better myself. So there you have it, guys. That is our top five rogue decks of the format. So if you enjoyed this video, go check out my buddy's channel on TheDuelFactory, as well as leave a comment down below and subscribe. So if you've enjoyed it, I'll see you next time. All right, peace out.
Catch you guys in the next video. Peace.